Welcome to our very last class. So thank you guys for being here. We're joined today by our last guest speaker, my good friend and amazing founder, Nathan Barry, who is the founder and CEO of ConvertKit. ConvertKit is a email marketing company for creators. They've really been building for creators for a really long time, long before anyone else was really talking about creators. And they help more people make money online with features like landing pages, email forms, email automation. The company, I think, is at about 27 million in ARR and has over 30,000 customers. And they've gotten to this point completely bootstrapped, making it a pretty special company in the creator economy, in my opinion, and a rarity really in tech circles. So kudos to the whole ConvertKit team for making so much progress and being kind of one of the exemplars of what a bootstrapped company can do. And then a little bit more about Nathan is that he got his start as a creator himself. So he started a blog, built up an email list, wrote an ebook, and then ConvertKit was really born out of that experience to help creators with email marketing and to be able to make money online. So with all of that, I will turn it over to Nathan and let him take it from here. And oh yeah, if you guys have any questions during the session, just put it into workshop questions and I will call on people.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. The first thing I would say is that one ConvertKit tradition that we have in our Zoom calls is the chat is ridiculously active and everyone trolls the entire time. So feel free
Okay,
to do that.
yeah,
Um, you know, I
we'll do
I'm
that.
very I am very good at ignoring the chat. So, but I did that on I was on a Zoom call with someone else and we like kept our habit going of just posting random comments in the chat. And the person was like, "What is going on?" And they were like
Most people
trying
can't handle it. It's like I think for normal people it's very distracting. It's like being a Twitch streamer and seeing the chat on the side fly by. They
Yeah,
used to distract me all the time with this too, but now I'm kind of used to it.
you're a pro by now. So what I'm going to do today is just share some of the backstory on ConvertKit, some of the lessons, particularly maybe up to our first 500,000 in MRR, and then try to leave plenty of time for questions and all of that. So we'll dive in, make sure if I screen share the correct thing. There we go.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. So my story starts, or the story I'm going to tell you today starts with Heaton Shaw. If anyone knows Heaton, he's an amazing founder. He's become a good friend of mine. And back in 2014, he and I were hanging out in Las Vegas at a conference. And we're walking down the Las Vegas Strip, coming back from dinner. And he goes, Nathan, you should shut down ConvertKit. And I don't know about any of you, but like that's not a nice thing that you should say to a friend, if you're trying to be supportive or anything like that. Like, don't tell them to shut down your project. But that's what Heaton did because he's an asshole like that. No, he's a wonderful person. And I was totally taken aback by that. Like, wait, what? Like, this is the thing that I've poured so much time into. I should shut it down. And he actually said that and then just kept walking. And I was like, didn't know what to do with that. And so that's where our story starts, right? With him saying that. And before we dive into all of the details, I just want to share that, and I'll share the whole backstory to know that like ConvertKit was not always this like obvious success. And we'll talk through a lot of details, but a quick bit of backstory there. I got my start first in design, designing for the web, designing iPhone applications. We had an app out for the iPad. The day the iPad was released, I got into writing and teaching about that, wrote books, the App Design Handbook, designing web applications, and then Authority. So that was my background as a creator. I was selling about $250,000 in digital products per year. And in that time, I became obsessed with email marketing. And just like I would talk to friends and say, when I would sell a book or something, and all these sales would come from the email list, I'd be like, wow, email's driving more traffic, more sales than all the social media platforms combined. Like, this is amazing. And friends here who have been in internet marketing for a while would be like, yeah, we've all known that since 2001. Like, do you want a gold star? Like, what what do you want? This is something that everyone knows, is that email is driving these really high conversions. But I was just obsessed with it. So I was trying to learn all of the different things that I could about best practices for email and everything else. Um, and what I ended up doing is just having more of these little hacks for MailChimp, little add-ons. I was writing custom code and all of that to try to make things work the way that I wanted. And finally, I decided, like, okay, I'm going to start my own email product, particularly around this idea of email courses and dripping out email to people on a certain schedule. And in my typical style, what I always do is I work in public. That's something that I've done for a long time. All of the numbers from my book sales, like the day I launched my book, I would have a public blog post about, how it was doing, how many sales it had. And so when I launched my SaaS company, I decided that I would do a public web app challenge, I called it. And the goal was to go from 0 in revenue to 5,000 MRR in 6 months. So I launched it January 1st, 2013. Little pro tip, if you want to keep track of how old your company is, it's really helpful to launch it on the first day of the year, because you can just always know. And so I launched that. I blogged about the whole thing in public. The very first sales page for ConvertKit looked like this. It was all about, like, hey, if you're an ebook author or something else, and you give away a free guide, a free opt-in incentive, then it would basically make it easy to send a series of emails timed to when the person subscribed. That was challenging to do in MailChimp at the time, and I wanted a tool that was just based around that. So I worked on this for the first 6 months, quite a bit, blogged about the whole process. You can find that at nathanbarry.com. And I thought, like, okay, I'm going to hit this goal. I did pre-orders. We got to a couple thousand in revenue. And ultimately I didn't hit the goal. This is the chart of MRR. So you can see jumping in, let's see there. First pre-order started in March. We started to get revenue, and we peaked about 2,500, 2,400 in MRR. And then I found that, like, the product still just wasn't that good. It was hard to sell. And it just wasn't working well. And so there's sort of this downside of recurring revenue, is that, one, it's amazing to get and it recurs every month, except that you encounter this thing that's not so fun, which is churn. And so if you don't keep replenishing this bucket, then it gradually drops off. And so at this point, in September 2014, when I had the conversation with Heaton, that's where we were at. We were at 1,400 a month, 1,300 a month in revenue. And that's where he was saying, you should shut down ConvertKit. Because the second half of that conversation, when he stopped me, is he said, or, like, you can shut it down because it's not working. Or you can take it really seriously and double down on it, give it the time, money, and attention it deserves, and, like, really build it into something. Because I was, working on it as a side project, probably 20 hours a week. I think it probably showed that, it wasn't my full-time thing. It wasn't what I was doing, doing with all of my time. And so he was really saying, like, decide, is this something you want or not? And I sat with that for a while, because I had expected, ebook sales, when I launched those, had just taken off and gone really well. And I'd expected everything else to sort of follow the same path. So it was really disappointing that it didn't. And one thing that I do is I like to make mental models, in a simple system for how to make a decision. And in this case, the decision, right, is shut down a product or keep working on it. So I asked 2 questions. The first one is, do you still want this as much today as the day that you started? I think we all probably have that experience of creating something, and you have all this excitement and this momentum that goes into it. And then after, whether it's a week or a month or 6 months or a year, you're like, I'm just not feeling it anymore. Or someone's like, hey, weren't you making that startup? And you're like, yeah, no, like, it just kind of fizzled out. And that's totally fine. And so you ask, like, okay, in my case, it's been 20 months since I started this. Like, do you still want to run a software company? Do you still want to build this thing? And in my case, the answer was yes. Like, I did still want that. The ebooks and courses were selling well. but I wanted to build a software startup. And so I was like, okay, great. Then proceed to the next question. And the next one was, have you given this product every possible chance to succeed? And that's where I started to see a disconnect, where I was like, no, I was working on it part-time. I'd only put a little bit of money into it to start. Um, it certainly wasn't set up for success in the, it didn't have every possible chance to succeed. And so there I saw a disconnect between what I said that I wanted and then what my actions were actually doing. And so in that moment, I took Heaton's advice and did the thing that he was trying to get me to do, and that was to double down on the product. And so I took our savings, which was 50 grand at the time, our being my wife and I, and put that into the product. We hired a small team. It was just 2 people, but instead of working just with contractors, I ended up, hiring 2 people to the core team, one to do engineering. I was doing design, and then the other person was doing customer support, and marketing activities. The next thing that we did is focused on a specific niche. So before that, I was building like email marketing for anybody, people who need email marketing services, people who have a problem kind of like I did, people who are frustrated with MailChimp. It was not compelling marketing. And so when we chose email marketing for authors as the first niche. And then after doing some exploration in that, pivoted a little bit and went to not email marketing for creators. Like that was still too broad of a bucket for now. And we went to email marketing for professional bloggers, and seeing that that's a segment of the audience that we could really attract and do well with. The next thing that we did is just started direct sales. And that was listing out people to reach out to and contacting them directly and all of that. And I'll get into that. So the first phase of ConvertKit, where it grew and then petered out, was all about selling through content. And that's how I, built my blog audience and done everything else. And so I was like, content marketing is the way to do it. Like, let's, read everything that HubSpot put out. And what I found is that when you sell through content, you get rejected all the time without knowing why. So let's say that Leah and I were having a conversation and I was like, you should buy this thing. She has to, she's socially obligated to respond with like, yes, no, maybe a question, something. But when you're selling through content, it's like, ask, hey, would you buy this thing? And it'd be like, she just like stares at me and like backs away slowly and then awkwardly leaves the room. On the web, people just close the browser, hit back, and they never give you any feedback as to why they didn't buy your thing. And so that's sort of the magic of direct sales, is that you actually get that feedback. Because I think a lot of creators have this experience of making something and putting it out on the web, and it just doesn't resonate and they never know why. And so I always say, like, get out and have those conversations. So what I did is just 3 things. I list out prospects. I would cold email them with personalized emails. None of this like load thousands of emails into an automated cold outreach system. So it was instead just fired off from, my Google account. And then the goal was always to get on a call. And so when it came to listing prospects, what I would do is try to go as narrow as possible. So I'd look for, customers that we already had that were successful. Like, for example, we had a men's fashion blog that was a customer. And so I went and listed out all the men's fashion blogs based in New York City where this person was. And so then I would try to include some of that. Like, here's an example of an email where I would say, is anything frustrating you with MailChimp? Because I've targeted, someone specifically who's using MailChimp. I run ConvertKit, an email marketing platform for professional bloggers. Then I try to name drop the most relevant people that I had. All right. And so if I have one men's fashion blog customer, I may not have any big names to drop, but I know if I'm reaching out to other men's fashion blogs, they're going to know that one name. Did the same thing. We had a paleo recipe blog that was really popular. And so I would go through and list out, professional paleo recipe blogs run by women. And that would get me down to a very narrow group. And I knew that my cold outreach would land to someone who knew that one customer. And so I didn't have big names to drop, but I had relevant names. What's funny is that like a year or two later, I was trying to raise capital, and the venture capitalists that I was talking to, they were like, email marketing for bloggers, that's way too narrow of a niche. And honestly, I was probably doing a terrible job pitching to raise capital. But I didn't get into the fact that no, we started with like these ridiculously narrow niches where I could list everyone that met those criteria and then would sell to that group. So basically what we do, I keep saying we, I mean I, when I say that, it's very much the royal we. What
We're
I would
all
do.
spiritually a part of it.
Yes, exactly. I would send this email right here. A lot of people would respond to it. People would list out, oh, MailChimp doesn't have tags. I'm frustrated with deliverability, some of these other things. And that would lead into a conversation. And the goal was to get them on the phone. But I always ran into the same problem at that point where people would say, like, they would like the product, they would be interested in what we were doing and everything else, and then go, you know what? I'm sorry, I'm just not going to sign up. It's too much work to switch. And what's interesting is when someone says no, like back to that question of, will you buy this thing? They always have to give a reason why, right? You can't just say no because I don't want to. You always say no because it's too expensive. I don't think it's a good fit for me, whatever else. In this case, everyone chose it's too much work to switch because it is a lot of work to move email products. And so what I did is just started doing concierge migrations, and it came kind of out of chance because I like didn't want to get rejected one more time with that. It's too much work to switch. And so what I said is like, it's not too much work. I'll prove it to you. I'll do it all for you for free. And so in those early days, I would do a lot of migrations where I would be switching someone over, from MailChimp to ConvertKit, like copying and pasting all of their content in an email sequence and exporting and importing their subscribers and everything else. And that really overcame a lot of objections. And it was kind of funny, like people put so much on that one thing that then that was like their biggest objections. And when you took that away, they'd often be like, okay, all right, let's do it. And that ended up getting quite a bit of traction. The next thing is I had a very sophisticated sales CRM. And by that, I mean, I used Trello. And I just made columns for, like contacted, and then like how interested they were, and just moved them across the board. And the most important thing that I learned that was not natural to me at all, but that made this actually work, was just to follow up. Like, I'm the sort of person who would reach out to somebody and say, hey, let's do this thing. And they'd be like, yeah, maybe. And then I would forget about it. And honestly, so many of these things just took, months, or in some cases, years. Like we just had an account switch over to ConvertKit last month that I think I first reached out to them maybe 4 years ago. And that's fairly normal. And so being a creator who likes to write and design and blog and everything else, I'm not naturally a salesperson. And so I had a few friends who are better at sales and business development, like drill this into me that you have to follow up, you have to have a system. So to fast forward a little bit, so it was September of 2014 that kind of made that decision. That was right here to double down on ConvertKit. And then through that direct sales process from then up until the next summer, we got to 15,000 in revenue. So it was from, 1,500 to 15,000 in revenue purely through direct sales. And that's where we started to get a little bit of traction. Now there was a little bit of a problem in there, and that 50 grand actually doesn't last very long. So right in there, we totally ran out of money. I started putting things on credit cards. I didn't feel like we had good enough numbers or traction to like seriously think about raising capital. So we didn't at that point. And just sort of like, how can we grow MRR a little bit faster so that, I can pay everyone's salaries, or pay two people's salaries basically, and just barely not run out of money. And so it almost worked. I basically floated it on a credit card until revenue passed expenses. And then we've been profitable every day since then. The other thing that started working around this time is an early customer of ours described ConvertKit just in passing as the power of Infusionsoft, but easier to use than MailChimp. And we ended up using that line a ton because basically everyone at the time who was doing fairly simple things were using MailChimp, and everyone who was doing like complex advanced things was using Infusionsoft. And so those were the two camps. And this one line that one of our customers said in passing ended up being just incredible positioning. And so that worked really, really well. And so one takeaway for me was, spend a lot of time. It's worth it trying to get that positioning just right. And often that best language to describe your product is going to come from customers, not from, like you endlessly brainstorming in your own journal. Okay, so we had direct sales. The next two channels that started in are word of mouth and affiliates. Now, I remember having a conversation.
Question.
Yeah.
Nathan. For the direct sales stuff, are you still doing that now with getting on the phone with creators and talking to them and following up and emailing them in a very customized way? And like, how do you scale that?
Yeah. Well, you scale it by hiring a sales team. And that comes in, that comes in later. We did direct sales a lot in the early days. It's how we got traction, and then stopped for a long time. And actually now we're starting to do it again. And basically finding that we can get, so in the early days, it was direct sales to get any kind of traction. And then now it's direct sales to get customers that are going to drive a narrative or have a big impact. So for example, last week, Arnold Schwarzenegger sent his first email newsletter on ConvertKit. And that was a direct sales effort. That was, a lot of work on that side. And so we do direct sales now to try to add customers who are going to like push the definition of creator, right? Because we have a ton of bloggers, podcasters, newsletters. Like I think most of the biggest newsletters on the web, like Tim Ferriss, James Clear, Farnham Street, Christian Rubin, all of them use ConvertKit. But we don't have as much in the music space. So it was a big direct sales effort to get like Tim McGraw, for example, he uses ConvertKit now. And so we use that to expand the footprint of who people would think of as a creator that should use email. Does that make sense?
It. Yep.
Sweet. So when ConvertKit was at like 2,000, 1,000 MRR, somewhere around there, I had a conversation with someone who their company had grown from 2,000 a month to 50,000 a month in the course of a year. And I just thought that was amazing. I was like, oh man, how'd you do it? And he was like, oh, it was all word of mouth. And I remember thinking like, that is the most frustrating thing to ever hear. Because like as a founder, you're sitting there like, oh, you know what? I tried everything, but I forgot to pull the word of mouth lever. I should have just pulled that lever. That would have been so easy. Because it's this advice that everyone says of like our growth came from word of mouth, but you can't do anything with it because it's not actionable. And so the thing that stood out to me is that direct sales is what creates that word of mouth, right? You don't just magically get it. It doesn't show up. You have to go out and chase it. And so what we found around 15,000 in MRR is when each sale started to get a little bit easier. Someone was like, oh, I know that person who uses you. Or I heard about it from this, right? Pat Flynn talked about it. Oh, that makes sense. And that started to kick in. And the next channel that we added was affiliates. And that was sort of the paid word of mouth bucket. And so we'll talk about that a little bit because a lot of people ask about it. And the first thing I see is a lot of SaaS founders getting really mediocre results from their affiliate program. And this is explained by something called the 98-2 rule. The first time I heard this, it was from Chris Guillebeau, who's a creator and author and does a lot of great stuff. And I saw this and I was like, oh, 80-20, I know what that is. Like 98% of your results come from 2% of your customers. And so I was talking to Chris and I was like, yeah, I know what that is. And he said, no. No, the 98-2 rule is that only 2% of your affiliates will ever sell anything at all, ever. And that's really what I found, is that it's very, very lopsided. You're basically going to see that tons of affiliates don't do anything. People just sign up. And it's really about using direct sales to engage the best affiliates. So you don't just open up a program, say, this is our commission, this is what we're doing, and go from there. You really have to go out and actively recruit affiliates. So for example, in like the online business space, we recruited Pat Flynn from Smart Passive Income, and he has been a huge affiliate for us. And then there's a blog called Wellness Mama in the health and wellness space, and they drove a ton of traffic and attention in that area. So Dave, going to your question, any concerns on whether affiliates use techniques that you weren't cool with? Yeah, you have to police an affiliate program pretty heavily. On the, just like Lee was saying, that she had people impersonating her, it's pretty normal to go on Twitter and find like a kit_convert username, that is replying to people's tweets about ConvertKit with an affiliate link. The nice thing is then you can track down who that affiliate link is, and you can deny all their commissions, or like we'd have people bidding on branded keywords and stuff like that. And so you just make it clear that that's not allowed, and deny those commissions or have a conversation with the affiliate. Having a tool that's made for that really well. We use an affiliate program called LinkMink, and they make that process really, really easy. The other thing I would say is a ton of people use really small affiliate commissions. Like they'll be like 5% or something. And in our space, we chose 30%. It made it so that creators, and this is a 30% recurring commission for life. And so you'd have all these creators who could make quite a bit of money by recommending ConvertKit. And the thing that was extra special about it is they would have, like, say they had products that they would sell one-off, like an ebook or a course. A lot of them wanted recurring revenue. And so in this case, they could get $300, $500, $1,000 a month of recurring revenue without having to run a SaaS product or something else, and deal with all the pain from it. So yeah, there's a lot on there. Another thing that we did that worked well is we told our customers, hey, if you write a review of ConvertKit, we'll give you a month of the product for free. And that worked great. We got tons of reviews written. The fun thing is if someone had like 500 subscribers and wrote a review of ConvertKit, we'd credit them $29, because that's what a free month was. But in some cases, people had 100,000 subscribers and they'd write a review and we'd credit them $600. And so it lined up, like the free month lined up with sort of the scale of subscribers that their review would go out to. Okay. And then the next thing there is, like I mentioned, doing direct sales with affiliates. So I had a conversation with an affiliate or a potential affiliate, and just over email. And he was saying like, hey, next time you're in New York, like, let's get together, let's grab coffee. And I mentioned to a friend, and I was like, yeah, someday when I'm in New York, maybe I'll do that. It was actually to Ryan Delk, who ran a lot of growth at Gumroad and now runs a startup called Primer. And he was like, Nathan, that is a reason to go to New York. Like, this person just said that they would meet with you if you showed up. So let me tell you a little secret. You just make up a reason and you go and you say, hey, I'm going to be, in your city on these dates. Like, would it work to get together? And surprisingly, that works really well. And I learned that that's how business development is done, is that you don't wait for like a conference or something else. You just plan that one thing. And when you get the anchor conversation, then you book the ticket and show up. And so I started doing that to recruit affiliates where like doing a trip. I live in Boise, Idaho, not exactly the tech capital of anything besides Idaho. And so I would plan trips where I would, fly to New York, get one anchor conversation, and then, uh, once I had that meeting scheduled, I'd actually book the trip and then plan other meetings around it. Other key places for creators, were Nashville, San Diego, etc. And that it worked really well. It was great for recruiting affiliates and building traction. Here's some faces of some people I met with. So like Joel is a fitness blogger. He's now in Austin. Leo Bauto ran Zen Habits. Seth and Katie were in Nashville and ran Wellness Mama. So just like a whole range of people and just building connections and meeting up with them. So this is when things started to work, right? So in July 2015, we're at 15,000 a month in revenue. And by December, it really started to kick off and we were at 98,000 a month. If you look at this graph, the only thing that upsets me about it is that I really wanted to get to 100,000 in MRR by the end of the year. And it drove me crazy that it was like January 4th that we hit that and not December 31st. But that's just the curse of being a founder and never being happy. So let's see. The next problem as we go into kind of the next phase of growth was really that customers could sign up anytime. So they don't, like they'll put it off. And then affiliates would also kind of do the same thing. They would be slow to promote the product. And so that's where we really had this thing of how do we turn it into an event? How do we create any kind of urgency? And that's where webinars came in. And coming from a little bit of learning from some of the direct marketing space, we realized that, okay, webinars, not a salesy webinar, but actually teaching like how do you grow a list? How do you grow your audience? How do you set up automations? Any of these things would really work well partnering with an affiliate to get traction. And so we went all in on webinars. Our largest webinar was with Pat Flynn. It generated 750 new accounts or new trials just from that one webinar. Like the first month we did 13 webinars. The second month we were trying it, we did 21. And then we found that about that like 15 to 20 webinars a month range was all we could handle. And we would do them of any size. There's obviously those giant ones, but we basically thought of it as if even 10 people showed up to it, that was still way more efficient than, doing a demo to a single person. So exactly as Till's saying, like webinars as sales. It also grew our email list a ton because everyone would join our email list to subscribe to the webinar. So that got really a lot of traction. Another thing that helped us a lot in this next like kind of phase of growth is having expansion revenue. So any business that you're designing, like make sure to have expansion revenue. So right with Teachable, it's more GMV, more sales. Help Scout, if you're a customer of them, it's more seats. In ConvertKit's case, it's more subscribers. And we actually have, now that we have ConvertKit Commerce, we have the added benefit of GMV as well. So we get kind of these two angles to have expansion revenue. And so when you look in a given month, like this is around that time, this is one of our best months when we were driving a ton of those webinars. You can see there's a lot of churn, a lot of contraction, but like the expansion and reactivation is really counteracting a good part of that and still resulting in pretty significant net new MRR for the month. So 30-day expansion being upsell. So in this case, somebody pays, let's see, $29 a month for up to 1,000 subscribers, but then their list grows to 3,000 subscribers or, up from there. So then they pay us 49, and so on. Because we have this whole range where on the same scale, a beginner creator would be paying, $29 to just get started. And then you have like a Tim Ferriss paying thousands of dollars a month for his multi-million subscriber email list. And so always look for the options there. If anyone's curious, all of our metrics are totally public. If you go to convertkit.bearmetrics.com, you can see them update. That's what this dashboard is. You can see it update in real time. You can see all of the success of the business, all of the pain points, and everything else. Okay, so a couple of other things. The traction that we got. So exactly 2 years after that decision to double down on the business, we went from 1,300 in MRR to 411,000 in MRR. And a little pro tip, if you want a hockey stick, right? Everyone wants a hockey stick graph. The trick is you got to suck for a long time first to flatten out that bottom to get the right curve, right? Because if you just were awesome from the beginning, it'd just be a straight line. It's not a hockey stick and it just doesn't look as cool. So, make sure to be mediocre from the beginning and then find your stride. Couple other things in here. We were talking a bit earlier about doing things that don't scale. I always love the examples from, YC and from the Collison brothers. And I hope like this story is an example of like the direct sales and these things that don't scale at all. And then it turning into these channels that do scale, like word of mouth, affiliates, and getting these influential customers and being able to use their names, being able to use their influence on the platform and so much else to drive a lot more sales. So I want to leave a lot of time for questions. So I tried to make this relatively quick. But today, just give you a pulse of ConvertKit. We're 26.9 million ARR, hoping to tip over maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day we'll pull off 27 million. We've been a paid product from the beginnings. We didn't have a free plan until a year ago we launched that. So we're almost 35,000 paying creators. Average revenue per user is about $65. We've got 315,000 free creators using ConvertKit. We're totally bootstrapped, small team of 61 people. We send 1.2 billion emails per month, and we've got 110 million engaged subscribers across the platform. So yeah, that's the high level I want to tell you of sharing the story, give enough context, and then I'd love to just take questions and dig into any part of it. There's probably
awesome. That was so good. Maybe I'll just kick it off to get everyone's juices flowing. I wanted to ask you about the fact that you're bootstrapped and never had raised venture capital. I believe you had mentioned once upon a time that you did pitch VCs and tried to raise venture money. How do you think that would have changed the course of ConvertKit? What were the pros and cons of that outcome?
Yeah, so there was a moment we were about 110, 120,000 MRR, growing 25% month over month. And I went to the SaaStr annual conference in San Francisco. They had like this whole track where you could set up meetings with VCs. And so I met with, Greylock and Social Capital and a bunch of others. A couple things. One, no one was interested then in creators as a market, like bloggers, creators. It was like, that's way too small. Maybe if you pivot to the rest of small business, that could be a thing. Second thing is I was probably giving a terrible pitch. Like, it's not the VC's fault for not seeing it. It was probably that, it was a terrible pitch. Shout out to Tamaz Tungas from Redpoint, because he was the one who was like, I don't know if you should raise capital. You're on a good trajectory, but if you do, I'm in. And like, the market is plenty big enough. Like, he saw it from the beginning. And so, yeah, he's amazing. Raising capital, like how it would have changed the trajectory. It's a good question. We might have grown a lot faster. There's a lot of weird things that we do that we probably wouldn't do now. Like we were a 100% remote team at a time when that wasn't very common. I think we've got a pretty amazing company culture built around like building financial independence for the team, like the culture of trust and transparency that we have that I think would be harder as a funded company. Something that I'm really proud of is that we do profit sharing. So we've distributed 3.5 million in profits to the team, because 60% of the profits in the company go directly to the team based on basically just how the company performs and how long they've been with the company. So I'm not sure. There's a lot of competitors in the email space that have raised capital, whether it's a Klaviyo or Active Campaign is a great example of a product that's raised a lot of capital and deployed it really, really well to get to a lot of revenue, and they're a lot bigger than we are. So I'm not sure. I'm just one of those people that always has to do it my way, even if it's maybe less effective. I will say that it's probably less stressful my way of not having like the pressures of hypergrowth or anything like that.
Yeah, makes sense. Corey, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah. So my question, Nathan, is what have you seen? Maybe it's recently, or I don't know, it could be more longer term, that have been like the key features that you guys have released that have led to retention. And then when you think about your competition, like what do you think were the differentiators you guys prioritize that really set you apart from the market?
Yeah, it's a good question. And there's also a good point from Sergey in the chat that kind of touches on retention, because that's something else that we've struggled with all the way along is as you target, it's not B2C, right? We're not a social network, but we're certainly not, we're not B2B in, we're not selling to enterprise users or anything like that. So you end up in this weird place where you have, I've referred to it as like, prosumer, you sort of have this price point of the 30, 50, $80 a month, but you have someone who you might serve them really well as a customer and they are going out of business, and that's the reason they canceled, or they decided like running a blog is hard, being a creator is hard. And so they might shut that down. So churn's something that we've struggled with all the way along. Things that have made a difference. Probably the biggest thing is in the focus and positioning. So a lot of tools get spread really wide in trying to serve a lot of different kinds of creators. And we've tried to, or not even creators, right? A lot of different kinds of customers, like MailChimp being the biggest example. They're like, let's serve all of the small business, which is wildly different needs. I don't know, the person with the cupcake shop has completely different needs than the blogger selling courses. And so we tried to stay very focused on the creator market and going from someone who's just getting started all the way up to the creators who have the biggest audiences, but staying away from those that are like big publishing houses or, running sales teams or something like that. Like Tim Ferriss, for example, has the reach of a pretty popular magazine that would probably have like 20 marketers on staff and all this. But he, it's just him, his assistant, and then his like head of business. It's just the three of them that run that whole operation. And so we really tried to focus on like powerful features in a lightweight way that don't need a whole team to manage and run them. And I think that's worked really well for us. And so it's probably a lot of what we say no to, of not spreading our team so thin that we're building out like CRM functionality and sales tracking. And, like after I get off the phone with a lead, let me log those details. Then probably just other examples would be gradually solving more problems that each creator has. So, at first it was just email, and then we went and solved forums and then landing pages. And now we're going the other way and solving, payments and commerce, and just trying to gradually pick up more of that stack.
Cool. Let's go next to Connor Beckley.
I feel like in Clubhouse when you get called on and you're not prepared. So I have two questions. One, I'd love to know today what % of your revenue is coming from your affiliate programs. And number two, would love to know what made you decide to publish your metrics publicly. Not a lot of people doing that.
Yeah. To Today, it's just over 20% of revenue that comes through the affiliate program. That used to be higher, more like 33, 35%. What's interesting is because of sort of this billboard effect of the affiliate program, there's a lot more revenue that, isn't directly attributed to the affiliate program, but because of, the affiliate program got those people or got them talking about it, and then they signed up separately. So it's had a huge success. And then we've just, it's expensive. And so we've put a lot of time and effort into other channels to try to grow the affiliate program, but grow our other channels like paid advertising and SEO and all that a lot faster. So yeah, with a little.
And then on the public stats side, what made you decide to do that, and was it worth it?
Yeah.
And I think where that becomes really interesting, right, is I think Buffer is another company that really kind of focuses on transparency, but they've had a flat year, right? So like if you look at their stats, it's not, they probably don't wish that they were public right now.
Yeah.
How did you think about that?
Yeah. One, I just want to call out the trolling in the chat is on point. So good work, everyone. So I had two friends once. I was at a dinner for a conference, and they like pulled an intervention where they're like, Nathan, it's great that you had your stats public till now. Maybe we were like 400, 500K MRR, but they're like, it is time to shut it down. Like this is doing more harm than good. Like our competitors tell you, or your competitors tell us, like, it's so nice that we can just like log into Nathan's Barometrics and like see everything of what's working. How are webinars performing? Oh, really well. Oh, nice. And so I would not recommend putting your metrics public for business reasons. I don't think that it makes sense. Maybe it makes sense early on. You can get this momentum, exactly as you pointed out, when things are going really well. It's a good thing. The reason that you should put your metrics public, or the reason you should do anything, is for mission reasons. And so I grabbed this little plaque, and it just says, "We exist to help creators earn a living." And this is a plaque. I'm really into woodworking, if you can't tell by the giant create sign behind me or anything else. But I made that plaque for everyone on the team, so it sits on their desk. And it's just that reminder that we're not here to grow the biggest company possible or anything else. We're here to help creators earn a living in every way possible. And one big way that we can do that is by sharing every aspect of our story, right? So if it's like, we built a really successful company, and you're like, without numbers, you don't know what that means. Or let's say you're talking to a creator and they had a really successful launch and they're giving you advice about it. You don't know if really successful was $10,000 or like, I just saw a ConvertKit creator publish some of his stats on Twitter and on Indie Hackers today. And he had a $500,000 launch. And someone might use like going really well or crushing it to describe both of those outcomes. And so I find that, real numbers help so much and tell so much of the story. And a lot of people will do it in like these snapshot things, right? Of, you hear it when a company raises funding, often you'll know what their revenue is in that moment. The reason that I like the public dashboard is I imagine me, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, really struggling with churn or with growth or something else and being like, what were ConvertKit's numbers when they were at 20K MRR, and being able to go back and find that and filter the dates to that and see all of our stats and tell the complete story. So I think of it as a tool that anyone following in our footsteps in creating a SaaS company that they can use. And I think of that being just as important as anything else that we would do from like a business growth perspective. So don't do it for like marketing reasons. But if it's core to your mission, then absolutely do it.
Yeah, I have to imagine, a lot of these creators are businesses, right? So for them, being able to see into a business that they respect is just, it's pretty cool, right? Even though it wasn't done for business purposes initially.
Yeah. Another thing that I'll say just on being public with numbers, sometimes in companies you optimize for weird things. Like I think we've all talked to a founder, heard from a founder who's like, we're going to double headcount by the end of the year or something like that. And you're like, that is a really weird stat to optimize for. Like customers served, revenue, any of these things that are worth optimizing for, but headcount is a weird thing to, to push as a leading indicator. But I think what happens is, in at least in a lot of US culture that I'm a part of, people don't talk about money. And so if I ask you and I'm like, hey, Connor, how's business going? You might be like, good. We just hired 20 employees. We're now at 50. We're now at 80 employees. And before you know it, the metric that you're using in your own head for your success is headcount, when really you should be using revenue, but we've decided that it's weird to share revenue. And so we don't. And I think you end up in this weird psychological place where you end up optimizing for the wrong thing because you won't share those metrics. And so now when someone asks me, how's business going? I'm like, pretty good. We're about to pass 27 million ARR. We're struggling with these things on churn. Growth isn't quite as fast as we want, but I can just speak to the actual numbers rather than like subconsciously optimizing for these pseudo metrics.
Let's go to Dave McClure.
Nathan, you may have already answered some of this, but I was just wondering about, like, a lot of people quote the do things that don't scale when you're getting started. And I always wonder, like, why not just continuously do things that don't scale, but then hire people to scale them? Or, I guess what I'm saying is, do you have any sort of concierge approach for your larger customers that might help you do some discovery? You kept talking about Tim Ferriss a lot.
Yeah. So those concierge migrations that I talked about doing in the early days, we still do those today, but now it's run by a team. And we, do them for any size of customer, because we basically find that if someone needs the help, it's like if they have subscribers to move over, they're going to be a pretty good customer, because a lot of our churn comes from people who are just starting out and, trying to get something going. And so if you already have it, like, migrate them over, and that's really good. So that's an example that now a team runs. I haven't done a migration myself in a long time. I try to think of it as, doing things that don't scale now to test ideas or to test markets. So for example, we're expanding a lot into music. And so that's how we got Tim McGraw and other musicians, was like, is there a path into music? I'm not sure. And so I just went out and started doing those sales directly. And then turns out there is a path there. And then, then we get into acquisitions and all of that. Side note, we're announcing an acquisition next week. No, on the 30th. So if you guys watch for that and help me amplify it when we announce it, that'd be great. Can't tell you what it is right now. It's like Gumroad. It is not Gumroad. But that is, you guys are good. I like this. Anyway, so I basically think of, all those do things that don't scale as like the spearhead for an initiative. And then we'll see where it goes from there.
Let's go to Sergey.
Hey, Nathan. So what's your one company metric? You mentioned not counting headcount, obviously, but most conventional wisdom also says don't just count revenue. Mm-hmm. So is it like paying creators or some kind of segmentation? And has it always been that? Like, I'm curious about seeing how that changed with the company.
Yeah, honestly, it's been revenue for us for quite a while. It's been an easy thing to track and measure. The problem that you run into, and this is why people say don't just track revenue, is that you can end up with this revenue that is, the zombie revenue, right? Someone signs up. If it's only 30, 50, $100 a month, it'll sit there on a credit card for 6 months and then they'll churn. You're like, why did this account churn? You'll dive in and find out that they actually never fully onboarded, right? That's why when you look at publicly traded companies or that kind of thing, they have very strict definitions of churn because they're not counting all of that sort of thing. And so one thing that we started tracking is engaged subscribers. And so that's that 110 million number. And so it's all of the unique email addresses across the platform that are engaging with content every 30 days. And the reason that we went with that is because on the very small end, like, how do you define a customer, like a free user, as having successfully onboarded? And we tried, like, they created a form or a landing page, But really what we settled on is that they got to 10 subscribers in their account, because that's enough that, hey, for your newsletter, you've got something going. Some people are paying attention to you. And then on the really big end, let's say a customer signs up, imports 50,000 subscribers, and we're like, yay, they're now paying us. But if they never email those people, if they're never actually using the account, then that engaged subscriber metric will mean that it won't count those 50,000 subscribers, because they haven't opened or clicked or anything. And so that's sort of our more pure metric than revenue. And we've been optimizing towards that for just the last 3 or 4 months. And we just added the ability to slice it by cohort, so we could see, or by creator type. So we can see within coaches, musicians, artists, athletes, how many engaged subscribers do we have? And then the team can set metrics around growing that.
When you're saying engaged subscribers, do you actually look at open rates, or as long as they got the email sent to them?
It is that they opened or clicked on the email.
Gotcha.
Total subscribers is a lot higher. It's just that's not a useful metric.
Nathan, do you have time for a couple more questions?
I don't know how long you want to go, but I've got another 30 minutes. I don't know if I should say
let's go for 5 more minutes.
Okay.
It's an important holiday for you, I know.
It is. It's my dad's birthday. I'm Irish. My middle name is Patrick. It is an important holiday.
We'll get you back to that very soon. Okay, let's go to Mark. Mark Mariah.
Very happy Paddy's. Oh, Jesus, the game is very high. Happy Paddy's Day. I was celebrating it earlier here,
Nice.
and sobered up to join. I'm more at the 1,300 a month level, and so I'm looking at starting an affiliate program to get to 400 a month, 400 grand a month. How should I do it? Should I just copy yours, or was there some logic where you came up with that? Did you start with upfront versus I'm particularly fascinated with this lifetime guarantee.
Yeah.
Did you just make it up, or was there a reason?
The market that you're in is going to dictate part of that. So let's see, for example, AWeber had an affiliate program that was really popular at the time, and they paid 30% recurring. And so we were recruiting people away from AWeber's program. And so that was an important factor. And you don't want to get into this debate of we're 20%, but it's a better product, especially in those early days. It's just you just need traction. And so going to 30% worked well for us. The really nice thing about the recurring aspect is you only pay for accounts that are quality, right? And your incentives with the affiliate are aligned because they want to refer accounts that last for a long time. Whereas in the hosting business, so for example, if you're promoting Bluehost or Flywheel or one of these other ones, like running with Bluehost as an example, since they use a very active affiliate program, they pay, say it's like a $5 or a $10 a month hosting service. They'll pay you, $50 upfront or $100 or more upfront to refer it. And that works for them because they have a huge amount of capital. They know their lifetime value. They know that hosting is ridiculously sticky. And so they can shell out all that cash. Whereas, for you now, for me in the early days, I don't have that cash to put out. And so I structured the affiliate program. So I pay the affiliate just after I get paid. And there was a 30-day delay there, right? So I get paid, know that the revenue is good, or have 30 days to hope that it's good and is not going to get clawed back because of fraud or something, and then pay out the affiliate. And so you don't get into this cash flow problem. Perfect. A lot of people get into that with paid acquisition, where you're able to spend this money to acquire customers, and it's working really well, and you're happy with your payback period, but you can still go negative and then need outside funding because it just requires more cash than you have to feed this beast. And so that's why the affiliate program is structured that way, because it doesn't have those problems.
Great. Yep. I like that long-term view. Makes sense. Thanks. Enjoy the rest of the day.
All right, Travis, close us out.
Sure. I think a lot of the folks on here are maybe a little earlier in their journey, and I'm just wondering, like, if you were able to talk to yourself, 5, 6 years ago, what would the like most important piece of advice be that you would give?
Yeah, that's good. So honestly, I kind of debated a lot about what version of a talk to give here, because I feel like a lot's changed in the creator economy and all of this space. But kind of the reason I want to share the early days of ConvertKit is it points to building something, fairly substantial over a long period of time. And I think when you browse through Twitter, like this person who just launched a course and made $500,000, like we see that example. We see some other startup just growing like crazy in their numbers. And it's just example after example of what seems to us of someone launching an idea and blowing it out of the water. And it's just amazing to see. And then we launch our idea and that doesn't happen. And there's a couple things. Like one, you have to know that no one pays attention until that hockey stick starts. And so, when we were at 100,000 MRR, people were like, this is amazing. I just heard of ConvertKit. You guys are absolutely blowing up. And no one knew at all about the years that predated that. Now, so I guess there's that side of it. So I think the biggest point that I want to make is it can take a really long time. Yeah. And so just have that mindset that like, I'm going to show up consistently for a long time. And to not look for the validation, in that short term. Because otherwise what happens is you work on something for 3 months, 6 years, a year, maybe 2 years. And it's not going to get that traction and it doesn't end up where you want. And like, I mean, for us, 2 years in, $2,000 a month in revenue. And so that's where a lot of people were saying, shut it down. And then we had people like, Heaton saying, really what he was doing is baiting me into like, take this seriously and stick it out. Yeah, there's lots of good stuff in there. Connor, I'm just going to answer, was the free program worth it? Yes. It did not have the growth trajectory change that I wanted it to, or that I hoped that it would. It definitely accelerated our growth, but not like a huge amount. But it's very mission aligned. And so again, if you go back to like, we exist to help creators earn a living. And so allowing people to start for free rather than having to pay, we now have hundreds of thousands of people that, who wouldn't have $29 a month that can start. And so that's a really big thing.
Yeah, I think one of the big benefits of being bootstrapped is having the patience, like your own internal patience to be able to wait it out and to take that really long time to find something that worked.
I think, yeah, another thing on that is a lot of these companies sell before they get substantial traction. Like we had a competitor called Drip, and they launched at basically the exact same time that we did. And we like, they grew faster than we did and we were slower, but then we caught them past them. And they sold to lead pages, I think for about $10 million. And it was a really solid multiple, a great return. I think maybe they were a couple 100,000 in MRR at the time. And, it was a great exit for those founders. But it's just sort of the thing, if you wait and keep going for a long time, like MailChimp is just an example of what happens if you do the same thing, like show up and do your best work for 20 years in a row. It's like, oh, well, maybe you could do 800 million a year in revenue. And so I look at that from ConvertKit side of like, okay, I'm 8 years in, we're at 27 million a year in revenue. What happens if I give it another 12 and get all the way to the 20 year mark? And I think you just get to see that compounding kick in. And so many people are in too much of a hurry. And so they're looking to compress that timeline. They're looking to get instant wins. And then they're looking to sell or get that exit while the growth rate is still just right. And at least for me, I'm going to stick at it for a long time.